Hello there and welcome to Prime Time. Well, up first tonight, it's climate change. Right now in Paris, major discussions are taking place on how best the world can tackle this global crisis. What looks pretty certain is that our bill here in Ireland for combating climate change may be very steep. That's because a large proportion of our emissions come from our agri-sector. So should our government demand special treatment for our agri-food industry, or just tell our food industry that foregoing expansion is the price we have to pay for climate change? That's what we'll be discussing in a moment. First, though, this report from Robert Short.
This week in Paris, the world is grappling with climate change.
I hope that we are serious about putting in place a legally binding agreement on climate change.
But translating rhetoric into reality is contentious.
We're going to fail, and we're going to fail utterly on making any meaningful contribution towards emissions reductions. And the implications for us as a country on that are enormous.
We need the food. The world needs the food. And we find to think that we could manage without it. We can't.
The reason Ireland's battle with climate change is focused on agriculture is because the sector is relatively so big here. By 2020, agriculture will account for 48% of Ireland's emissions. Our emissions will come under binding EU reduction targets of 40% by 2030. And there's more. The government wants the value of food exports to increase by a staggering 85% over the next 10 years. With direct implications for the size of the national herd and emissions. Clearly, climate change commitments and agricultural ambitions are on a collision course. In the middle is the science. Here in Teagasc's Oak Park estate in County Carlow, the limits of producing dairy and beef while controlling emissions are being tested.
The first thing is to try and increase the efficiency of the animals, for example, so that each cow, for example, is producing as much milk or as much beef as it can potentially produce, so that we need less cows. And the second thing we're doing then is looking at novel strategies to reduce emissions, primarily emissions associated with fertiliser.
The advances in agricultural technology developed here by Teagasc will go some way towards reducing the greenhouse gas emissions of Irish livestock. But if beef and dairy production is dramatically increased, as is the plan of government, then those advances will only go so far, and there will be a cost. The big questions are how much and who will end up paying. Ireland's big break at the EU negotiation table is the potential for land use like forestry to offset our emissions. If that's accepted, there's optimism the level of emissions may be contained.
We do see we will increase production, and we do predict that the emissions will flatline. And that's not an inconsiderable achievement in itself. We can probably reduce further, but we will need to offset emissions. We can't simply reduce while increasing agriculture. We have to offset it with forestry. So that will mean land use change.
Land use change, however, does not mean just planting a few trees. The scale required could mean encouraging some farmers to get out of livestock farming altogether.
We don't actually know what the official target is or what the official expectation is for the future of the beef herd. But I think we do need to recognise that for many farmers this is not a profitable activity. They're subsidising it out of their farm payment, and in many cases they would be better off looking at alternatives such as bioenergy, such as agroforestry, such as forestry proper.
The clamour for action on climate change sometimes drowns out deeper debates about energy, transport and the sustainability of food production across the globe. And on that, there's a fundamental disagreement over the entire direction of Ireland's agri-industry.
We're quite efficient at doing the wrong things. It's a bit like having an SUV with green hubcaps. We have a slightly more efficient ruminant-based meat and dairy system. However, if you take, for example, the Chatham House study in the UK, what they've said is that if countries like Ireland continue on the path of expanding ruminant-based agriculture, there is no chance of the global target of keeping global temperature rise below the 2-degree mark. It's absolutely impossible. To use their own phrase, it's off the table if we continue on the expansion of a dairy and meat-intensive diet.
We need to build the change, neighbour with neighbour, leader with leader.
Irish agriculture has used the argument that we're going to feed the world. The world will not be fed on powdered milk and steaks.
The lush grassland at Mike McGann's dairy farm in Longford is a prime example of Irish agriculture's secret weapon. McGann believes you can't hold back the global demand for meat and dairy.
You go to the developing countries, most of them aspire to the diet that we're talking about. They want a Western-style diet. You can't stop a trend, you can't stop an entire rising class of people who genuinely, as they get more money, as they have higher disposable income, they want to eat the burger, they want to eat the milkshake.
Irish farmers, he believes, enjoy a unique natural advantage in producing grass-fed dairy and beef animals. If displaced to other parts of the world, it would result in global emissions increasing. It makes, McGann says, Irish agriculture special.
Yeah, unashamedly it's a special interest, and I think we shouldn't for a second have to defend that it's a special interest. What are the unforeseen consequences of us reducing output? Does that mean another part of the world, less efficient, actually increases output? Do we cut down a rainforest in South America to grow the food that we wouldn't be producing here? I think it's a societal debate. I think as an entire global debate that we need to have rather than a national debate. Let's not demonise something that has a huge part to play.
We are the first generation to feel the effects of climate change, and we are the last generation that can do something to stop it.
However, there is an urgency to this debate which may force change quicker than we realise.
We can't simply opt out of our responsibilities in this front. We can't simply shrug our shoulders and let other people take the hit. Ireland, we have a responsibility. We're a first world country. And I think when the penny drops with our politicians and with our ag sector that climate change is here and it's real, then maybe we'll start getting real.
Ireland is already on course to miss emission targets set by the EU for 2020. This could cost upwards of €600 million, according to government estimates. But the bigger cuts to emissions planned for 2030 will result in even bigger fines, unless there's a major shift in policy or a special deal for Irish agriculture.
There's no way that we can support a situation whereby in 2025 or 2030 the taxpayer is paying hundreds of millions of euro per annum to support the expansion of the agriculture sector and to pay for the carbon credits. Carbon is not free anymore. The benefits of agricultural expansion, of which there are many, we must balance those benefits with the costs of expansion. And one of the costs which has been under-considered as of yet is the carbon costs of those plans.
Climate change is a real threat for many parts of the globe. Ireland's dilemma should be more manageable, but it clearly shows the difficult gap between recognising climate change and doing something significant about it.
Robert Short reporting there. I'm joined here in studio now by Kevin Humphreys, the Minister of State for Employment, Community and Social Support. Beside him, Ray Bates, Adjunct Professor at the Meteorological and Climate Centre in UCD, just beside us here. Oisin Coughlin, Friends of the Earth, and Eamon Ryan, Leader of the Green Party. Let me start with you, Kevin Humphreys. I mean, Ireland, like every other country, was asked to step up to the plate at Paris this week. And just if you read what the Taoiseach said, he seems to be saying climate change is important, but not that important, so not now, maybe later. Is that it, more or less?
No, I don't think that's what the Taoiseach said at all. But, first of all, this is quite a historical day because in the Dáil today, the climate change bill was passed. We're now one of the 6 nations in the world that has climate legislation on its statute book. So that's a major move forward and has been welcomed, I think, by virtually everyone, and we got all party support in relation to that. So that's the first step forward. What's happening in Paris, I think, is so important, not just for Ireland, but for the world, for every citizen.
Let's go back to what our Taoiseach said, though.
But what our Taoiseach said, and I think what he said very clearly, is whatever agreement is made with our EU partners next year, we will hit. So those 2030 targets will be a hit. Ireland will take its share of those targets, and we will process it, and we will achieve those targets. Unfortunately, and I would finish on this, is we haven't, for numerous reasons, and everybody knows those reasons, why we're not going to hit the 2020 targets.
Eamon Ryan, you described the government's position as shameful.
It's utterly shameful, and it's, I mean, come on. Yeah, big climate bill today, 6th in the world, we're up the top. I am sorry, it's meaningless. It's worthless because you've no ambition. And you've used it as cover, you've used it as a fig leaf for the last 5 years when you've brought us completely in the wrong direction, going against the course of history completely. In waste policy, your party put through an incinerator to burn 600,000 tonnes of waste, which is going to be anti-climate change. In improving our homes, you halved the amount of retrofitting of buildings to make them energy efficient that we were doing. In electricity production, you've extended the life of the peat-fired power stations for 15 years, which you morally could not do. You cannot do it. We know the effect of that. In food, you look to double Irish agriculture, and you wave this climate bill of how good we are. It's meaningless, it's worthless. The Taoiseach was perfectly clear in Paris on Monday. And your Minister, Alan Kelly, has been perfectly clear in the past. We're using all our political capital to try and get out of doing anything climate change. And one last word, if I can.
Sorry,
the real mistake on this is, you call this section about the cost of climate change. What you're missing out on is the opportunity, if we address this issue, as where we are a leader. That's where you're wrong.
OK, Kevin Humphreys, come back.
Sorry, Eamon, you're back again with sound bites. And you're
it's all truth. Every single one of those facts is true.
It's lovely. We're either going to have a conversation here or a shouting match.
No,
Eamon,
you also, if I can go on, you also abandoned public transport.
Eamon, if you just want to shout over me, that's fine. I'll sit here to listen to you. But the reality, you said when you were in government, the whole reason you said you stayed in government was to get a climate change bill passed. You didn't do that.
We reduced emissions. They're now increasing in your office.
Sorry, Eamon, you didn't do that.
We reduced emissions.
Emissions reduced because you sent us into a recession.
No. The EPA analysis shows that the emissions fell half because of recession, but half because of the measures that we put in place, which you've abandoned because you don't have a green bone in your body as a government.
OK, Eamon, let him reply, and then I'll bring him right back.
And that's quite the opposite. But Eamon, what are you talking about? Are you saying at this stage that we should go out now and cull the national herd? Because you're going into a series of sound bites. What we have to do now is to build a cooperation and a coalition to move forward. The climate change bill that was passed today is the first step in building that future. You constantly kind of come in and say, you should do this, do that. You spent 4 years in government. You didn't even pass a climate change bill, which you said was your top priority. Let me bring in Ray Bates, actually, for the moment. Ray Bates, this is your area of expertise. What's your position in terms of what can we afford as a country? Can we afford for our agri-food business and for our farmers to minimise and limit their production for the sake of combating climate change?
Well, I'm speaking as a scientist in the first place, Miriam, and I have a lifetime of professional experience in this area. From the time I did my PhD at MIT, worked at NASA in research there in this area as well. And my current research area is climate sensitivity, which I'm still working on. And climate sensitivity means what is the degree of warming that will result from CO2 doubling. This is the specific question that I focus on as a scientist. And in the IPCC report, I'll be using the abbreviation IPCC, which means Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Probably everybody knows it. But Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, in their 2013 report, the IPCC gave as the value for climate sensitivity, it lies between 1.5 and 4.5 degrees Celsius. This is the IPCC position. And
keep this simple now, right? Yeah. OK, but keep going.
OK, so if you double CO2, the warming that would eventually result is between 1.5 and 4.5 degrees Celsius. That's what's called climate sensitivity. Now, in their previous report in 2007, the IPCC gave as the window of uncertainty for climate sensitivity between 2 and 4.5. So they went from 2 to 4.5 to 1.5 to 4.5. So it has not got more, the window of uncertainty has not narrowed, it's got wider. And it's been widened towards the low sensitivity end. The low sensitivity end. Now, my specialty, as I say, is in this area. And there is emerging evidence that the complete range of values of climate sensitivity is shown on page 1000, page 1110 for Ocean's
just
information.
Before I bring in, just to simplify this, Ray, because we're not obviously all scientists here. What you're saying, if I'm correct, is that you don't think the progression of climate change is as big an emergency as the leaders in Paris are saying?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
It's not a planetary emergency. It's a very serious threat, and it justifies action to cut back emissions, but it is not a planetary emergency that would require countries like Ireland to seriously damage their national interest.
You're going against the grain of the vast majority of people. Okay, let me bring Russian
Miriam, obviously Ray is entitled to his individual expertise and his research, but I would prefer public policy in Ireland to be informed by the vast bulk of science and expertise on the other side of the scales. The five IPCC reports have concluded each time with more certainty that there's a real threat and there's increased urgency. The International Energy Agency, no left-wing tree huggers, say we need to leave the bulk of fossil fuels we know about now on the books of our states and our companies in the ground to have a chance of containing climate change. Now, call that an emergency or a crisis or a challenge, it certainly requires action now. The World Bank, again, no friend of environmentalists most of the time, say that if we're on track for up to 4 degrees of global warming, for which they think would be devastating for the global economy and which they think may be incompatible with organised human community on the scale we have it now on Earth. So call that what you like, but it requires action now. And that's why it was so disappointing to hear our Taoiseach in Paris give one fine words, promises and platitudes to the world leaders in the hall. Come outside and say to the media, don't worry lads, I didn't mean it. We're going to look for a special opt-out in agriculture, and anyway, we shouldn't be doing the targets we have.
Just to say, I need to bring Ray, and then I will bring back in Amy. I mean, you really are, when you listen even to Ushing there, cite all those different sources.
Yes.
You are in a tiny minority of a tiny minority.
I am in a tiny minority because I am one of the very few people in this country whose specialty is climate sensitivity. Oisin mentioned how many there are. I am one of them, and there aren't all that many people in the world who specialise in this scientific area. But what I was quoting is not a personal opinion, and when I give my scientific views, Oisin, I will not give personal opinions. I am quoting the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
Just Miriam, I hope Ray is right, but we can't afford to risk it. We have to act on the basis of the precautionary principle that the rest of the expertise says we face a real and present danger, and therefore Ireland has to play its part.
Precautionary principle. I go to Kevin Hubby's precautionary principle.
I have to say I don't agree with Ray. I think we have to be cautious in this. We have to plan. I think we have to plan for the worst case scenario. I think we have to now plan for reduced emissions. We have to work together, cooperating across all the spectrum to reduce that.
Kevin, you're clearly not. So you're not cutting back the national herd. What are you doing as a precautionary principle?
Sorry, you asked me, is what we've already done, we've carbon footprint nearly all the national herd. We're doing fast research in areas. If since 1990, the area of the total area of Dublin and Wicklow has been planted in trees, and there's another additional plantation in that area. So creating carbon sinks are happening.
Eamon Ryan, what would you say to that about those small things, but they have done those things, the government?
Oh, well, I'm not going to go back hitting the government. Right, I could go on all night about how they've abandoned transport and energy and a whole range of ways, but I want to make one point. In response to Ray. If I can make my point,
there has been huge investment in public transport, buses,
no, there isn't actually. You abandoned the big public transport projects, and there's no money for any walking, cycling, or other measures in your capital plan. But can I go to the bigger picture? And we need to go to the bigger picture, because this debate we just had at Ray is not happening anywhere else.
In the scientific area, Eamon, it is happening all the time.
Yeah, but not on primetime television.
That's politics. I'm talking science.
Yes, politics is what we need to talk about here for the moment. If I can talk politics just for a minute. Because what we just had is a historic moment where world leaders have come together for the first time, all 196 of them, and said they believe the science is an emergency. And they could all be wrong, a whole 196 of the presidents and all of their scientific advisors, but I don't think so. I think, unfortunately, they are right. Can I make one other point with that big global perspective, why our Taoiseach got it so wrong on Monday? Because he came out and said, well, we have to wait until we're wealthy before we can do anything. And we're only giving 2 million to a 100 billion fund. That's the defining issue, whether it is a success or not. If I can just finish with one point. I'm not misquoting anyone. If I can finish the one main point I want to make. The reason why this is an opportunity as well as not just a cost, as your heading says, is because in the coming together of what's happening, this historic moment of huge consequence for the first time, countries collaborating, that is the response, not just to the clients, if you just bear me out, Mary, not just to the climate crisis we face, but it's the response to the war and terrorist threats we face. It's a moment of collaboration. And for us, as a country which has always stood for international collaboration, to be walking the other way as the rest of the world moves in this historic direction is a fatal mistake by this government that needs to be unwound rapidly, either by our electorate or by the Taoiseach himself.
OK, Kevin, I will then bring you in.
We made it very clear in this budget. We made a €2 million contribution to that fund. It's the first, and it was saying very clearly that it was the first. That's on top of 34 million that has already been invested in third world countries to assist them with climate change, assist them in relation to changing their agriculture, assist them in solar energy, etc., etc. We made it very clear that the 2 million that was put into this budget is the first step. It's the initial contribution where we will build on that in future years, and that was made very clear. And Eamon knows that. And Eamon also knows that the Taoiseach made it very clear is that we would step up to the mark in relation to the negotiations agreement that will be made in the beginning of next year.
Oisín, I know you want to make a point, but I suppose a large part of Robert Short's film there was about, at the end of the day, there are a lot of people employed in Ireland in the agri-food business and in the farming agricultural sector. And don't most people want their governments, whether it's Kevin's or anyone else's government, to keep jobs and to expand jobs within areas like agri-food? And is that not a national government's first responsibility, Oisín?
Well, look, nobody's asking Ireland to do more than its fair share.
This is crucial.
But we are saying Ireland has to do its fair share.
Okay.
And I think Ireland's taken the wrong approach to this. We have no plan. They've done the bill, that's good, but we have no plan for reducing emissions. If you think about how we approached the financial adjustment, we were seen to be doing everything we could to hit the targets. That's not what's happening here. We're missing opportunities around fracking, around solar energy, around transport, around retrofitting. If we were seen to be doing all those things and then saying, look, we have a special problem, a particular problem with agriculture, can we look for some way of dealing with it?
Isn't there a straightforward contradiction, Oisín, between expanding our area of agriculture and agri-food and combating climate change? They are going different ways.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But the thing is, nobody was expecting major cuts in agricultural emissions by 2020. There was lots of things we should have been doing in this 5 years, or this 10 years, which we've failed to do. But yes, as we go forward in the future, it is not possible to keep expanding beef and dairy for baby milk powder and beef products and still do our fair share.
You want to come in on this issue?
Just to be sure, they're not basic foodstuffs. Then we're not going to feed the world, or not even the south of Spain needs, who mightn't be able to grow grain in the future. They're not going to live.
But if we don't produce it, someone else will. The whole question of displacement.
There is also a question of diet. And it is not possible for everyone in the world to eat as much beef and dairy product as Ireland does now. And there's no indication that they all want to either.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say that I support efforts to cut back greenhouse gas emissions in terms of a worldwide agreement at the COP meeting. I completely support the idea of a worldwide agreement. But Ireland should not be asked to pay a disproportionate price. And we're in a very special position. We're a major food exporting country. We have very large emissions because we export most of the food we produce. This is the situation we're in. Now, with regard to the World Bank report that Oisín quoted, he was referring to climate model projections. Now, the fact is that climate models are the best we can do to tell what the future is going to be like. But at the moment, climate models are overestimating. They are giving a greater warming than the observations by a factor of about 3. So any country like Ireland should not be asked.
We were talking earlier. The temperature increase this year across the world, I've gone off the scale. And yes, it's partly El Niño, as you said, but actually, it's incredible, the temperature increase this year. Like, you cannot ignore the reality of what's happening. You cannot ignore what all the other scientists are saying, that we are heading towards a 4 degree. And the models may change slightly, half a point there, half a point. But the fundamental science is clear. And if we don't, you say we shouldn't pay too much. You're missing the big picture. Those countries which address this first are going to gain. They're the place they're going to get jobs. They will sell their food at a higher price around the rest of the world if it's built with a genuine green brand in it. No one's saying that we cut back farming. Our farmers are going to have a huge job as being part of managing our land and managing this change. But to constantly depict it as a cost, or where we're being put under a burden. It's a better world if we address climate change. It's a better society, it's more fairer, it is shared out more equally. We need to change our economy anyway. Why would we not do it in this way?
Now, I cannot accept what Eamon says, that I am ignoring what other scientists are saying. I followed the IPCC report, And when I speak as a scientist, I am not giving personal opinions. I am not giving personal opinions. The climate models are, at the moment, giving a rate of warming that is about 3 times what's been observed in practice in the troposphere as measured by balloons and satellites. Now, at the surface, we have this year an exceptionally large temperature spike because of the El Nino, a large El Nino in the Pacific, and the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is showing large temperatures in the Pacific. And this is giving a huge spike this year in surface temperatures. But according to satellite measurements, this year has not given a record high temperature in satellite measurements. Now, in surface measurements, yes.
We could confuse the public.
Okay, let Oisin come back.
The IPCC concluded that we now have the same degree of certainty that human activity is causing climate change as we do that smoking is causing cancer.
I completely agree with you, Eamon.
At a certain point in that debate, we stopped talking about whether it was 50% more likely to die of cancer, or 25%, or 35%. We started to debate public policy to address the issue. Information, regulation and pricing. And we need all of those kinds of tools in our policies in Ireland if we're going to grasp the opportunities. There are actual opportunities in solar energy, in retrofitting and in transport that Ireland could, as a small nation that could have a lot of renewable electricity. And in farming. That we should be grasping now. And that is where I think Enda Kenny missed the big picture this week.
But Ray actually isn't, I think, I could be wrong, misquoting you here, he's not saying it's not happening. He's just saying it's happening slower.
But he's suggesting we don't need to act.
I let Ray in, I'll let you all in, I promise.
Science, yes. Yeah. I accept the IPCC findings. The central finding of the IPCC report in its 2013 report was it is extremely likely that more than half of the observed warming since 1950 is due to anthropogenic causes. I completely and absolutely support that statement. I do not disagree with the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, but I disagree with people who say that we have to take action now on the basis that this is an absolute planetary emergency.
If I go back to talk about the sentimental argument in your video was that this is all about farming. It's not. Farming is about 30% of our emissions. We have to be careful here that we could do a special deal for farming where farming expands. The rest of the economy would then have actually a much bigger obligation. The business community would want to wake up to that, and the transport community. But even in farming, there was a guy, Roger Schutz, came to a debate. We were involved in climategathering.org. Check it out on the website. And he made the point that actually there will be a likely connection between being environmental in our farming and profit. That actually it's really precision farming, smart use of the land, clever use of water, which is connected to it, and our carbon sinks, not burning them, the way this government is doing, can actually be good for Irish farmers and landowners. It's not maybe just going down the route of the big processors where they make all the profit. We want the farmers to make the money and have a connection to high-quality green food. That's not happening under this government.
The whole panel here accepts, and I think, Ray, you accept there is climate change happening.
Of course.
So what we need to do is plan to deal with it.
You're the government.
Yes, and we are, and we brought in a climate change bill today in relation to that. But instead of shouting and preaching at people, what we do is we have to build a coalition to move it forward. We have to bring everybody with us, both nationally and at home. And that's what's happening. And that's what our Taoiseach is doing.
But you said we couldn't afford to do it now, Kevin.
No, the Taoiseach said very clearly that we will hit the targets that are negotiated. As far as the planning within the bill that is passed, there has to be a plan. Whatever government is elected will have to bring forward a plan within 18 months. We have an expert advisory panel with Oisin worked with me on in relation for in 2013 is now in situ. The structures are there.
The law is very welcome, but it is no substitute for leadership, and Enda Kenny has failed on that score this week. And just a quick point on peat. We were first told by experts, the government was, to get out of peat in 1998, and here we are facing lawsuits from Antashka because we didn't plan to do it. And that's where Ray's point is dangerous. We have to plan now for a just transition for those workers and for money point workers now to get out of coal and peat in the next 5 years.
The government has a white paper coming up for Christmas energy. It should commit to close peat-fired power plants, not to burn coal in Money Point and not to frack. If you do those trees, there'll be a start to the sense that actually you might be going in the right direction.
Ray, I know you want to talk, but I have to wrap. I'm very, very sorry, but it was fascinating listening to all of you tonight. Thank you very much, David.
Thanks, Maria.
A nightmare experience for a Dublin family overnight. A cash van driver forced to hand over money after a gang took his partner and daughter hostage.